Second, guys. There we go. All right, I think we're good. Thanks again, Crystal, Wendy, and Hillary, and everyone for having me. And on behalf of Anderson Windows, I want to thank all of you for participating in this webinar today. We're going to talk about the wind provisions in the Florida Building Code, mostly touching on the building and residential, how the changes in ASCE 722 have impacted the new Florida Building Code. Now, as most of you know, the Florida Building Code is already in effect. Some of these things we talked about last year, and there's actually a little change to one of them that probably a lot of you are interested in that we'll talk about related to windborne debris. But the plan is to, about 30 minutes in, which I think is about where we're going to finish up one of the discussions. I'll open it up for some questions through the chat. And for just a couple of minutes, see if anything's relevant to what we just talked about. And then we'll have time at the end. I'll save some time at the end, make sure we have for some final questions towards the end of the presentation. Okay. So as we all know, the Florida Building Code, the 8th edition 2023 version went into effect December 31st, 2023. One of the things that's important is that it includes many, but not all, updates from the 2021 I-codes. Okay, because of the way the Florida process is now, all of the I-code updates are not included in the Florida Building Code. They have to be voted on individually, and the building and residential codes in particular, due to this process, are moving further and further away from the I-codes because of Florida-specific amendments and how the process is dealt with. So you will see quite a bit of differences, not just from we try to keep the wind side of things through groups that I work with. We try to keep them the same in the codes, or at least equal to or better than the I-codes in the Florida code. It also includes a number of the updates from the 2024 I-codes, which will be the base code for the next edition. The key change, and the one we're going to talk about, is that ASCE 7 has been updated to the 2022 edition. Okay, which is a little bit early for Florida because it just went into the 2024 I-codes this last cycle. So Florida jumped ahead, but in the last cycle, we were using ASCE 716, and there was a lot of concerns about some of the changes in ASCE 716, particularly related to the wind provisions. Some of those have been clarified through the adoption of ASCE 722. So the things we're going to talk about today, we'll talk about changes to the wind speed map. And this one's really important, and there's been a key change to it since really in the last couple of weeks. Related to the windborne debris region. We'll talk about some changes to roof pressures, which was one of the biggest issues with ASCE 716 was how the roof pressures have gone up and the complications associated with them. One of the new provisions in ASCE 722 is a brand new chapter on tornado loads. Tornado design is going to be required for some buildings, even in Florida. And then we'll talk about loads on soffits and roof overhangs, some changes there. Okay, so let's first talk about the wind speed maps. As has been done, periodically in ASCE 7, though it seems like it's been quite a bit lately. All the wind speed maps have been updated based on improvements to the hurricane hazard and wind field models. The hurricane wind speeds have increased slightly in some area of the state. We're still using the 3-second gust strength design level wind speed. So none of that's changed. We're still using the same basis of the wind speeds that we have been since the 2010 Florida Building Code. Let me get this little box out of the way here. There we go, cover my screen. Okay, so let's take a look at the new wind speed maps. There are a couple of key things here I'm going to point out regarding the wind speed maps and some changes to how you can determine the wind speed. Okay. But this is the risk category 2 map. This, the majority of our buildings fall into this category. And I'll show you a close up in a minute, but for risk category 2, this area is the only area that's been impacted in the state. The rest of Florida, it hasn't changed, really hasn't changed since the 2010. Wind speeds on the peninsula and kind of the northeastern part of Florida for risk category 2 are the same as they've been since 2010. We have some slight increases in the panhandle area for risk category 2. Okay, and this is, like I said, this is risk category 2 is our default risk category. If you don't qualify as risk category 3, which is a substantial risk to human life in the event of failure, or risk category 4, essential facility, or obviously risk category 1, which is temporary and farm structures, then you default to risk category 2. Okay. There's one other part of this the map we're going to come back to in a few minutes. Risk category 3, again, the same thing as risk category 2. Some slight changes here in the panhandle, but the rest of the peninsula is unchanged, going all the way back to ASCE 710. All right. Now, again, risk category 3, these are the ones that the buildings that pose a substantial hazard to human life in the event of failure. And risk category 4, a little bit more changes in risk category 4. Wind speeds have changed all the way over to the Big Bend area. Some areas see some, most in the panhandle see some slight increases, some slight decreases in here, but not significant for the most part. Okay, but again, for the rest of the panhandle, same, or rest of the peninsula, same as the 2020, which was the first time we had a risk category 4 map in the code, and these are our essential facilities. Okay, and then risk category 1, and again, we see the same thing through here. Some slight increases in the panhandle area. All right. So as I mentioned, going through the maps, the wind speeds have increased. Wind speeds have increased in the panhandle. The remainder of the peninsula is unchanged. And this figure here, the green area shaded, give you an idea of how, for risk category 2, how the wind speeds have changed. Okay, so for Escambia, Santa Rosa, and some of the counties through here, we're seeing some slight increases from around 150 or what used to be 140. 145-ish. It's now going to be between 150 and 160. And then this little area through here and through here, slight increases in design wind speeds. But the remainder of the peninsula is unchanged. And you'll see this type of, this is shown for risk category 2. But you see this for a similar change for risk category 3 and risk category 1. And then remember, for risk category 4, where there's some slight changes in this area as well. Okay, so in our opinion, kind of modest refinements to the map. A lot of the changes that occurred in in this area right here were the direct result of data collected after Hurricane Michael, which impacted the Mexico Beach and Panama City area. You guys remember in 2018. So that was the kind of one of the key pieces of the change to increase the wind speeds in the panhandle area. All right, one other, let me go back to the map here. You see it on all the maps, and I've got a slide showing it, but there was another pretty key change to the maps, though not technical, but some new code language was added for how you can determine wind speeds. Okay, as I've talked to jurisdictions throughout Florida and throughout the country, for years people have been using, or a lot of people have been using the ATC site, and I'm sure many of you have used the ATC site before. We do, when I've done on-site presentations for AIA. I'll ask that question, and quite a few people raise their hand. I mean, it's pretty easy. You put in an address, and it gives you a site-specific wind speed. Okay, the code's never specifically allowed it. Most jurisdictions seem to allow its use, although some Some don't. I know there's some in Florida that don't allow it, but the code now specifically says that you can use location. Let me get that may be hard to read. So, but it's new note 6. We go back to go to this slide here. It's on all the maps in the Florida the Florida Building Code building, and it's also in the residential code, and specifically says location specific wind speeds are permitted to be determined in accordance with the ASCE 7 Wind Design Geodatabase, or really what's called the ASCE 7 Hazard Tool or equivalent, suggesting that you could use something other than the hazard tool. Key takeaway here is that the ATC site cannot be used anymore in Florida. Yeah, theoretically, you could use it for the peninsula because the wind speeds haven't changed. But if you use it in the Panhandle area, you're going to get the wrong wind speeds. Okay, the ATC hazard by location website is still up and operational, but it does not include wind speeds for ASCE 722. Okay, and they have no plans to update it. And at some point in time, they're going to shut down the website. They're keeping it up for for some period of time. They haven't been very specific about how long, but going forward, you're going to have to use the hazard tool, not the ATC site. Now, the hazard tool is it's free. It's very similar to the well, I shouldn't say it's similar. You get pretty much the same results for the most part. That you get slight differences from the ATC site because they use slightly different algorithms to interpolate between the wind speed contours, but it works kind of the same way. You put in an address here and ask in this area right here, ask it to search, and again, it's a free tool. You can in your search bar type in ASCE 7 hazard tool and it'll pop right up. Okay, so you plug in an address, and then you'll have to pick which version of ASCE 7 you want. It gives you the hazard tool ASCE 710, ASCE 716, ASCE 722. Doesn't do ASCE 705 and previous versions. And then you click what's the risk category of the building, and we're looking at wind. But they also have data for ice, rain. For those of you who do work outside of Florida, we obviously we have rain, but not ice and seismic and snow. But there are other parameters there covered. But so we pick, for let's say we're looking at wind, and I put in Mexico Beach here, and you click View Results, and you get your wind speed. And then you hit on this detail button, and it'll give you some different wind speeds for different return intervals. If you're looking at deflection issues or serviceability and those type of things, you can get those wind speeds. And you can also, I don't have it shown here, you can also click on this overlay button and it will give you a map. And there's also a ruler tool that actually comes in handy when we're talking about the windborne debris region here in a few minutes. Okay, like I said, key takeaways here: the ATC site should not be used technically since the Florida Building Code went into effect, the 8th edition, 2023 edition, that is. But you can get the same basic information from the ASCE 7 hazard tool. Okay. All right, and like I said, when we finish this next discussion, I'll stop for a few minutes and take some questions. All right. So many of you probably heard about the change to the windborne debris region in the 8th edition 2023 Florida Code. It's a big deal. It expanded the windborne debris region in Central Florida significantly, and also expanded in some areas of the Panhandle and up Northeast Florida as well, though not as profound as the central part of Florida. The idea behind changing it, and it's only affected in the ranges of 130 and 140 mile per hour wind speeds, because if you're greater than 140, you're automatically in the windborne debris region. If you're greater than 130, then for years, or going all the way back to its origin, the windborne debris region has stated that within 1 mile of the coastal mean high water line, that you're in the windborne debris region. that term coastal mean high water line, it's never been defined. It's not defined now, and it's not mapped. It has caused some confusion. Although there hasn't been a ton of confusion that we've heard of in Florida about it, but in some other areas of the country, which was kind of the genesis for ASCE 7 making this change. And the idea is that for these windborne debris regions, the hurricane wind speed is governed by the overwater condition. Okay. So, but before we talk about this, I want to point out that this is likely changing. Okay, we are likely going back to the definition that we had in the seventh edition, 2020 Florida Building Code. At the most recent Florida Building Commission meeting back in April, they voted through an annual technical amendment process to revert back to the definition in the seventh edition 2020 Florida Building Code and to perform a study to assess the windborne debris risk for inland bodies of water. Now, I say it's likely because it's still got to go through rulemaking, and it can be challenged, and it doesn't go into effect until 90 days after the rule is filed, and the rule has not even been filed yet, according to staff at DBPR. So we're hearing that it's likely going to be July, August, time frame before the older edition goes into effect. So technically, this new change is in effect now. And I do know that many jurisdictions have been enforcing it. Some chose not to because of the complexity around it, as we're going to talk about in just a minute. But as of right now, it's still in effect. But the commission is working to change this, and we hope to have a study done through the Hurricane Research Advisory Committee that will be completed hopefully sometime around June of next year that can look at this and provide some guidance on where we go from here. So what is the key change to the windborne debris region? Well, we talked about that term coastal, and that's really probably the biggest thing is that in ASCE 722 and current version of the Florida Building Code, the term coastal has been removed. And so now it's not predicated on it being near the coast. And we really don't, like I said, we don't define coastal in the codes. We don't define, we do define coast in ASCE 7, but it's in the tsunami chapter. It's not even in the wind related chapters where this would apply. And then some new language was added. So it would be within 1 mile of the mean high water line where an exposure D condition exists upwind at the water line. Okay. So in other words, and I've got a drawing here, I'll show you in a minute. Exposure D condition is a site exposed to water surfaces in the upwind direction for 5,000 feet or 20 times the height of the building or structure. Okay. So we're looking at something, an ocean or gulf. This is a drawing I've shared many times. So you'd have to have 5,000 feet of this open water exposure to create an exposure category D condition. Now the definition also talks about 20 times the height of the building or structure, but for this windborne debris region, we're not talking about, we're not dealing with an exposure situation as far as design coming up with, the wind pressures for the building. So the relevant term is going to be 5,000 feet. So if you have 5,000 feet of open water within 1 mile of that open water condition, you're in a windborne debris region. Okay. So when we first looked at this, it seemed to make a lot of sense, or maybe thought it needed some refinement, but that term coastal mean high water line wasn't defined, and it wasn't clear exactly how jurisdictions were enforcing it in coastal areas. Was it just on the barrier islands? Were they applying it further inland? So this is an example of how it brought some clarity to the code. This is the Panama City area. So clearly, and for this example, we have 5,000 feet of the Gulf. So within 1 mile of there is a windborne debris region, which is kind of what we are pretty much what we were doing previously, right? 130 miles per hour and within 1 mile of coastal mean high water line. But with this new definition, what it also said was, I mean, it didn't limit it to coastal. So then you would look at these inland areas or slightly inland areas, bay areas, whatever you want to call them. We clearly got 5,000 feet. So within 1 mile that direction, you're in the windborne debris region. And you do that all along these coastal areas. So you would, we'd have there's a mile here. So in that direction, windborne debris region. Same thing here. You got a mile of open water. So it's from, or 5,000 feet of open water. So again, in the windborne debris region for 1 mile in that direction. Okay. Another example. This is not even Florida, but this is just kind of show you that you look in all directions. So we got 5,000 feet here, so be 1 mile from there, and then of course we got 5,000 feet, be 1 mile in that direction. So pretty much covering up that entire area there. Okay. The thing that a lot of us did not realize is that in Central Florida, there are a lot of lakes that meet this criteria. By FHBA did a count, and they come up with 60 or right around 50, I think, or somewhere in that range. And after they did it, they submitted there. I found an additional 15 that meet the criteria. So there are just a ton of lakes that fall within this range where the wind speed is greater than 130 miles per hour, and the lake has an open water exposure for 5,000 feet. So this is Lake Apopka. So not historically known to be a windborne debris, or not historically in a windborne debris region, but in the 8th edition Florida Building Code, it is now within 1 mile around Lake Apopka is in a windborne debris region. Okay, so I mean, it'd pretty much be all around Lake Apopka because it's a pretty big lake. You got 5,000 feet, so then you within 1 mile here, a windborne debris region. Interestingly enough, these lakes here, Mineola, I think that's probably Claremont, and I forgot the name of that one, but these all have 5,000 feet of exposure as well. So within 1 mile around these lakes is going to be in a windborne debris, and a lot of these other ones here. I mean, it's the Central Florida area is littered with lakes this large, and that was the thing that most of us didn't realize when this went into code, was how many lakes there were that met this criteria. And that's why we're where we are with this annual technical amendment, because it's a real big deal. I mean, not only for new construction, we're going to be in a windborne debris region within a 1 mile of this area, but if you're doing a replacement, replacement windows, which are a big deal in Florida, a lot of replacement window projects going on. So in this area here, you place your windows. Now they're going to have to be protected with shutters, or they're going to be impact resistant. Okay. So it was a pretty significant cost increase, and but that's kind of the basis for the commission making the change to delay its implementation and then do a study, and then we'll make some changes likely based on what that study comes back with. But just be aware that this change is in effect now. Some jurisdictions, in light of the commission's decision, they may decide not to enforce it anymore. I don't know, but the old definition won't be effective until 90 days after the rule is filed. And that's probably going to be, like I said, according to staff, that's probably going to be sometime late July, August. It could even be sometime in September if the rule is challenged. Okay. All right. All right. So I'll open it up for a couple of minutes for some questions, guys, if you have any. It looks like there's a couple here already. All right, so the hazard tool is showing some areas as 140 for risk category 2, when they used to be 136, 139 miles per hour, which now pushes to windborne debris. Why is that? There is a problem with the hazard tool. We have made ASCE aware of it. Let me show you where it's at. So I didn't mean to exit. Let me go. Yep. So I know exactly what you're talking about. let's go to risk category 2. So yes, in the hazard tool in this region right here, right, it makes a shape about like that. It's putting everything in this area here in, as 140 miles per hour, and it's obviously not. But you know, we've made them aware. We're hoping they're going to fix it. I hope that they would. We noticed this over a year ago and made them aware of it, and they haven't fixed it yet. But um, hopefully they will. Clearly, that area is not all in a windborne debris region, although some of the lakes, based on the new definition, is going to be. But yes, that is a problem that needs to be fixed. All right. Let's see. Is this change in ASCE 722 reflecting new trends and route alleys of the tornadoes? I, you know, I, you know, I'm not 100% sure how to answer that, but there, as far as trends go, there's been this idea, for quite a number of years now, going really all the way back to the Tuscaloosa tornadoes and the Moore, Oklahoma tornadoes, that, looking at how buildings performed within certain distances of the eye of the tornado, center of the tornado, that we can design buildings for some tornadoes, cost effectively. I mean, we do it in Florida, and wind speeds for EF1 and EF2s are comparable to what we're designing for in Florida. So I guess in terms of trends, yeah, there's this idea that we can design for cost effectively for some tornadoes. All right. How does this affect properties in proximity to the lakes? I guess you're talking about the windborne debris region. Well, I mean, if they're within 1 mile of a lake that has an open water exposure out in front of the lake, you'd be in a windborne debris region. It's like, let me go back to this map picture I had up here. So Lake Apopka. So yeah. So let's say you have a house, look, I don't know if that's 1 mile, or I guess it's pretty close. So you would, measure the distance from here to the water line, and then from the water line out. If it's 5,000 feet, you're in a windborne debris region. So that's how it's going to affect properties near the lakes. And like I said, there's a lot of them. Does the 5,000 foot criteria apply to riverfront? Yes. Any body of water, whether it be coastal, inland lakes, inland river, it applies to all of them. Windborne debris includes risky and dangerous projectiles. Yes, I don't think that was a question. How about areas around river mouths? Just answer that same question. Yes. Basically, you're going to from wherever your site is located, you're going to measure the distance to the water line. And if you're within 1 mile of that water line, and then you're going to measure out in this direction. And if it's 5,000 feet, then you're in a windborne debris region, and that particular project will have to have openings protected from windborne debris. Now you're going to have to measure in all directions. You're going to have to go here. You're going to get one of the problems with this is you get some really goofy looking windborne debris regions. They're because these lakes are not circles. So where you have, like, here's another example. Here's a good example here. Maybe that's kind of small. Like for instance, like you measure here, that you don't have 5,000 feet. So straight back here is not a windborne debris region, but then you get some weird looking shapes. And we're hoping that the study will provide a better way to identify these windborne debris regions. We think what ASCE 7 has come up with is confusing. And a lot of people think that as well. What about pond? What kind? Again, it doesn't matter what type of body of water it is. If it's a pond, a stream, most streams are not going to be 5,000 feet. But yeah, I mean, I think you get the point. I mean, some body of water that extends for 5,000 feet is going to trigger it. Okay. Is there a minimum width for the 5,000 feet? No, no minimum width. You're just going to make those measurements like what I just described a few minutes ago. Okay. All right. I think I cleared them out. I'll just look in the chat real quick. I don't see any. Yeah, it's about inland bodies of water. I think I've already answered that question. So, all right. So I think we went through all the questions. Good questions, by the way. But keep in mind that, like I said, the important thing here, important takeaway here is that, as I mentioned, the commission has voted to go back to our previous definition. But it's going to take time to get that done, and it could be challenged. It could be because we're departing from what ASCE 7 requires, which is, there's also this little statute that says you can't diminish the requirements of the Florida Building Code. So there's a couple of legal hurdles that have to be dealt with. But it's in process. It is in effect now. You want to make sure you check with the local jurisdiction to see if they are or are not enforcing this. Okay. All right. So let's move forward a little bit. Let's talk about roofs, because this was outside of the windborne debris region, which, at the time we didn't understand. We knew it would apply to inland bodies of water. We didn't realize how many inland bodies of water there were in Florida that met this criteria. At the time ASCE 722 was being adopted, this was the big issue, was roof design pressure values. In ASCE 716, the pressure coefficients for buildings of mean roof heights less than 60 feet were significantly revised. Roof pressures went up quite a bit, 300% in some cases. And the new graphs that we use to develop and the figures as far as zones go became extremely more complicated. For the graphs, some of the coefficients were truncated at less than 10 square feet, which is contrary to how we've historically done that. There were multiple new roof zones, a 2N, a 2R, a 2E, 3N, 3R, and 3E. Historically, we've only had zones 1, 2, and 3. Okay. But the biggest thing was that the pressures went up significantly, in addition to the being more complicated. In ASCE 722, some of the researchers went back to the drawing board, and the pressure coefficients and resulting design pressures for roofs have been revised again. For the flat roofs or slopes less than or equal to 7 degrees, no changes. That still stays the same. Of course, those didn't go up as much as the ones for roof slopes of 7 to 45 degrees. But for gable and hip roofs, for slopes of 7 degrees to 45 degrees, we're back to 3 roof zones. All the graphs are now truncated at 10 square feet, like what we had before. And there's a pretty, I wouldn't say significant, but a change in how we deal with roof overhang loads. And I'll show you that as well. Okay. So this is just one example of how the figures have changed as far as the zones go. And you'll see these changes reflected in the residential code through the simplified method in the residential code. But again, instead of all these messy 3E, 2N, 2R, all these different zones, now we're back to one simple zones 1, 2, and 3. Okay, similar to what we've historically had. As far as the graphs go, again, we see this one was truncated at 4 square feet, and we've got multiple lines here, and this is the roof overhang value, and it's way more complicated than what it used to be. This was ASCE 716 and ASCE 722. Nice, clean new graph. Equations are a lot easier to work with. If a lot of people, instead of working with the graphs to get the pressure coefficients, they'll use the equations for all these graphs are in the commentary of ASCE 7. It's really easy. Put it in the spreadsheet, and can get the pressure coefficients very easily. For hip roofs, again, no more zones 2N and 2R. It's all zone 2, 1, 2, or 3. Okay, and the changes to the hip roofs are some of the more profound simplifications. In ASCE 716, we had the two different graphs, one for depending on what the height to width ratio was, and that was something that was not well defined. And if were in between, you had to interpolate between the two. This part of the map was extremely complicated. Now we're back to something much more simple, and only 3 zones. Okay. All right. So I put this table together to kind of give you an idea of how the some of the impact of the changes. I will mention I'm only showing the decreases here. There are some areas of the roof where you see slight increases, but most of those are zone 1. Okay, so for most projects, I shouldn't say most, but for a lot, people are going to use the the nailing requirements from a lot of the more the higher pressure areas, such as zone 3 and zone 2. I'm going to always do that on residential. Commercial jobs, they'll sometimes separate them out. But again, the increases in zone 1 are very slight. So for gable roofs, from 7 to 20 degrees. For zone 2, about a 9% decrease. Really no changes for zone 3. For 20 to 27 degrees, about a 16% decrease for zone 3. For 27 to 45, about a 21% decrease in zone 3, and which are the highest pressure areas. Okay. For hip roofs, this is an example for a hip roof at 45 degrees. Pretty significant and robust changes. Zones 3 and zones 2E and what used to be 2R, we're looking at a little above 30, right at 30% decreases in design wind pressures. Okay, so like I mentioned, when ASCE 7 was we were first considering the adoption of the 722 edition, this was the big deal. At the end of it, it turned out that the windborne debris region was the big deal. Okay. The other change is how we deal with roof overhang. You'll notice I didn't show any graphs for roof overhang because we don't have graphs anymore. To come up with your roof overhang loads, basically for roof slopes greater than 7 degrees, you sum the external pressure on the roof. Let me just go to this next slide instead of going through that. So you sum the pressure on the roof, whatever the graphs give you for the roof, or if you're using the simplified table in the residential code, whatever the pressure is for that area of the roof, which is going to be zone 2 or zone 3. And then you take the wall design pressure for the underside of the roof overhang, which is what we've been saying using for soffits for years. Okay. But that's how you'll come up with your roof overhang loads now, instead of having some number that you that are given in a graph, and then we'd have to separate out the number to design the soffit. Okay. Now we just use the wall pressure coefficient, and we add that to the roof pressure coefficient to get our overall load on our roof overhang. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about tornadoes, and then we'll open it up for some questions at the end. Okay. And this is another item that we thought was going to get a lot of attention, but don't hear a lot about this, and don't hear a lot of questions about it. Someone earlier had a question about trends, and yes, there has been this trending idea that we can design for tornadoes, at least the ones that are lower on the EF scales, your EF2s and 1s and perhaps EF3s. And those are by far the majority of I think it's 80-something% of all tornadoes that are formed are EF2 and less wind speeds. And we design buildings in Florida for those wind speeds all the time. But historically, the codes and ASCE 7 have not addressed tornadoes at all. ASCE 7, for the most part, has specifically said that in the body of the standard that these wind speeds do not include the effects of tornadoes. ASCE 716 did provide some guidance in the commentary on recommendations for designing tornadoes. Pick a wind speed based on the EF scale rating, and then there were adjustments to the coefficients, and there was a set of simplified adjustments. Okay, but this is a new study, and that what we have in the code right now is likely to continue to be revised and improved over the coming years. So it's kind of a starting point. But it's science based. It's based on the research that we have available now, understanding what the wind effects of tornadoes are. Okay, but there's a new chapter 32 in ASCE 7 that specifically addresses tornado design. Okay, there's tornado hazard maps and there's design criteria, and we're going to look at all these. And then if you look in the Florida Building Code building, there's a new section 1609.5 that states the design and construction of risk category 3 and risk category 4 buildings and other structures shall be in accordance with chapter 32 of ASCE 7. Okay. And you see a similar section, forget the high velocity hurricane zone 1611, not 1611, 16. I can't remember the section number, but it's in there for the high velocity as well. Okay. But the key thing here is, and you've probably already seen this, is that right now, and I say this right now because there's ongoing work and ongoing study, but right now the tornado loads only apply to risk category 3 and risk category 4 buildings that are located in the tornado prone region. We'll look at that in a few minutes. So we talked about this earlier. Risk category 3, these are buildings that pose a substantial risk to human life in the event of failure. There's a laundry list of those in table 1604.5 in the building code. Things that, buildings where if they failed, a lot of people are potentially be injured or die. And risk category 4, these are buildings that need to remain operational after some type of event. Police stations, hospitals, fire stations, those sort of things are essential facilities. Okay, so tornado design only applies to risk category 3 and risk category 4. Okay, so what exactly is our tornado prone region? Well, it is nearly or probably close to 3/4 of the United States. So Florida, and we know we have tornadoes down here in Florida, and hurricanes, are the ones we think about, but most of the time. But there's routinely tornadoes that do damage. In fact, there was one in what was it, the Destin area? I mean, it was last year where this one particular house was picked up off its foundation and was leaning against another house. I'm sure everyone saw that picture. So we do have tornado hazard in Florida. And Florida is in the tornado prone region. Okay, so you do have to consider this. All right. So a couple of other important things before we get into the details is that, and as you look at the wind speed and design criteria, the tornado speeds we're going to show you, these buildings, if you design a building to the tornado loads of ASCE 7, it cannot be considered a storm shelter. And it is not, doesn't meet the rigorous criteria of ICC 500. Okay, it just doesn't. As you'll see when we talk about debris impacts and when we look at some of the maps. So it's stated in ASCE 7 that these buildings designed here are not storm shelters. And to be qualified as a storm shelter, it's going to have to meet ICC 500. And again, like we talked about, these speeds, they basically correspond to EF0 to EF2. Okay. We'll get into all the details, but we're using the same return period for our normal wind speed. And I kind of already mentioned these two notes here about to qualify as a storm shelter, it's got to meet ICC 500. Okay. So let's look at some of the details. All right. Now, when do you have to do tornado design? Well, you have to consider tornado design unless you meet one of the exceptions. The exceptions are if your tornado speed is less than 60 miles per hour, then you don't have to do tornado design. Also, if your tornado speed is less than these thresholds here, then you don't have to do tornado design either. So let's say like your tornado speed is 70 miles per hour. Okay, so you're above 60s, you're not exempt here, but your V ultimate wind speed is 150 miles per hour. Okay, so half of 150 is 75. So your basic wind speed is more than twice what your tornado speed is, so you're exempt. Okay, so these are there's different ones for exposure C and exposure D. So these are the triggers for when tornado design is required. Okay, one thing that's very different about the tornado maps is that while they're location specific, but they are essentially based on the size of the building. Okay, they're based on what's called this effective plan area of the building or structure, which is the smallest convex polygon drawn around the building. And I think I just have this one shape here. Okay, so it's the smallest convex polygon you can draw around the building. So obviously, let's assume these buildings have the same width and same length here. Okay, this one's U-shaped, so the floor area is a lot less. But the effective plan area, when you draw the smallest convex around each building, obviously we get a nice little square here. That's the smallest convex polygon there. And for this building, it's going to be the exact same thing. So even though these two buildings have different net floor areas, the effective plan area is the same, because tornadoes are small, particularly compared to hurricanes, and the tornado strike probability for this building is the same for this U-shaped building is the same as it is for a building that's rectangular and enclosed. Okay, so there are 8 tornado maps for risk category 3 and 8 for risk category 4, and they're all based on the effective plan area of the building. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of the maps. All right, so this is the tornado speeds, and these come from chapter 32. This one is for an effective plan area of 2,000 square feet. So what do we see here? And the wind speeds are different. They're going to be the highest in Tornado Alley here, and they're going to decrease as we move out this way, right? Which is a little bit different than how in Florida the hurricane wind speeds are highest out here, and they decrease as they move that way. So for a 2,000 square foot risk category 3 building, the entire state of Florida is less than 60 miles per hour, so you're exempt from tornado design. Now here's one that's 10,000 square feet. 100,000 square feet, risk category 3 again. And here's the 50 mile per hour contour. It clips through Florida, but here's the 60. So all of Florida is less than 60 miles per hour, again, exempt from tornadoes for risk category 3. There are maps for 250, 400,000, 1 million. There's, like I said, there's 8 maps for different effective plan areas. And then if we look at for a very large risk category 3, some type of large school campus maybe, now we've got higher wind speeds. We got 88 through here, and so you'd be 90 right through here. So everywhere is the wind speed is greater than 60 miles per hour. So you did at the very least have to consider tornado design. Okay, but don't forget that these are risk category 3 and risk category 4 buildings, and the basic wind speeds or the V ultimate wind speeds are going to be higher too. Okay, we'll look at a couple from risk category 4, kind of same things, 2,000 square feet. This is risk category 4, where everything's less than 60, so you're exempt from tornado design. But if we go to 100,000 square foot risk category 4 building, now the entire state is greater than 60 miles per hour. So we'll have to consider tornado design. Okay. And then 1 million square feet, the higher the effective plan area, the higher the wind speeds. Okay. If tornado loads apply, they're going to have to be checked, even if the tornado speed is less, and it is going to be. Like this is a 1 million square foot effective plan area, and the wind speeds are between 100 and 110. The wind speeds are greater than that for the ultimate wind speeds are greater than that for throughout Florida, for risk category 4, 3, and 2. But some of the parameters change, so you're going to have to check the tornado loads are going to have to be checked. And in general, what's going to happen is in a lot of cases, the roof is going to have to be designed for tornado loads, and the walls and perhaps some of the components and cladding will be designed for the normal wind loads, because there's changes to some of the coefficients. Just for now, just give you an example, a couple of them. The directionality factor goes from 0.85 to 1.0. Impact protection is required for risk category 4, and it's optional for risk category 3. But if you choose not to protect risk category 3, you're going to have to use a higher internal pressure coefficient. It's going to cause the loads to go up. But the good thing is that even providing protection for risk category 4 or 3 is consistent with what we require for hurricanes, the ASTM E1886 and E1996, or the Miami-Dade County protocols. Okay, so but there's a number of other changes but I'm not going to go into all those as far as tornado goes. But there likely be some cases where tornado loads are going to govern. But let me go back to a map I haven't marked on. And well, I'm marked on all of them. So based on, it's hard to know for sure, but I'm working on a fact sheet with another colleague for the state. He's going to try to map this out a little bit better. But most likely, where the tornado design is going to come into play is going to be in this Big Bend and Jacksonville area. Okay, most likely that's where tornado design is going to come into play. Why is that? Because that's where our V ultimate wind speeds are the lowest. Okay, so even a lot of areas down here and in the Panhandle, tornado loads are going to have to be checked, but they're likely not going to control over your normal wind design. But in this area of and depending on the size of the building, especially you get these larger risk category 3 or risk category 4 buildings, and you get these higher wind speed, higher tornado speeds, it's a good chance that the tornado loads are going to govern over at least some part of the design. Okay. So, at any rate, this is, like I said, it's new to ASCE 7. It's likely to go through some refinements. In fact, ASCE is in the process of updating ASCE 722. Just like Florida is updating the next version of the code already, or getting started to. These codes never stop, no matter what. But saying that, the next edition of ASCE 7 will be the 2028. So it would likely be the 29 edition before we would even consider putting anything new in the code for as far as wind provisions go. Okay. All right, last few things just mention. For those of you who have used the simplified methods in ASCE 7, they've all been deleted, every single one of them. There's not a single simplified method in ASCE 7. Now, the simplified method or the simplified table in the IRC, or not the IRC, well, the IRC and the Florida Building Code of Residential, those haven't been deleted. They're still in the codes. But if you had or were inclined to use the simplified methods in ASCE 7, they've been deleted. And there's some, you get slightly lower pressures, though. I mean, it's very slight. I almost didn't even put this in here, but due to an adjustment for the height and exposure adjustment coefficient. For exposure B at mean roof heights of 40 feet and up, and exposure C at mean roof heights of 140 feet and up, some slightly lower pressures. Okay. All right. So it looks like I finished up right about when I wanted to, and I'm going to open it up again for questions. Do we have any new ones here? Let's see. All right. So is there any rule or parameter for what constitutes a measurable body of water? So a small pond or even a lake whose depth fluctuates with rainfall level every year. How's that measured? That's a good point. That's something we talked about at the last couple of meetings. The fact that this mean high water line of the lakes, it varies depending on the time of the year. And yeah, all I can say to this is, I think we're going to wind up with something different. I don't think this was when this was changed in ASCE 7. I don't think it was well thought out. But what constitutes a measurable body of water is just a water surface. It doesn't really matter how deep it is. The depth doesn't really matter because it's about the ground surface roughness. So if it's a body of water, then there's limited obstructions to the wind flowing over it, whether it's the ocean, river, or small pond. The most small ponds, I don't think, are gonna have a 5,000 foot of exposure of water. So you basically have to have. Put my ruler up here. Or my, let's see. So again, for these ponds, I mean, whatever they are, you got to be able to measure 5,000 feet across that body of water. Okay, if a pond qualifies, and then a pond qualifies. I don't think most of them will, though. Does this apply to golf course? I mean, it could, just like the exposures apply to golf courses. I mean, you've got a body of water, and you see it a lot where you see these different, they're not really canals. I don't know what you call them, but I see them a lot of times on golf course. Oh shoot, I lost my slide. Let me hold on one second. So you see these narrow bodies of water. Yeah, hold on one second. I was gonna get back to some reason this left. So, you see, places where I'm not drawing squares, but there'll be this like narrow body of water, and they're all connected. I mean, you could have some quirky situation. Obviously, you don't have 5,000 feet that direction, so no windborne debris region on this side. But for whatever reason, if that were 5,000 feet this way, then it could potentially impact that and cause that to be in a windborne debris region. It's all about measuring across the water surface. Thank you for your presentation. Very informative. Can you provide some recommendations for resources to calculate wind loads on a small residential structure? I can't, there are a number of design firms. I'd hate to recommend any of them. Probably many people on this call here can do the small residential stuff or bigger residential as well, or bigger buildings as well. But you can email me later and I may give you some recommendations. I grew up in an area with tornadoes. We were advised to crack windows to equalize the pressure. Is that not true anymore? A little bit of it's still recommended that you don't crack open the windows. For years we thought it was the pressure change caused buildings to blow up, and then the research at the time started thinking that, well, we get this partially enclosed condition. So we open up a window, we open up anything, wind comes in, and internal pressurizes the building and makes it look like it blow up. But new research is showing that there is a pressure drop. And that's why there's recommendations to protect windows and doors in the hurricane, that are designed for tornadoes. So the recommendation would still be to keep windows and doors closed. You don't want wind and water coming into the building, and you'd want to, if you opened a window on one side of the house, you'd need the same opening on the other side to allow that wind to evacuate the other side of the building. If not, you're going to have a buildup of pressure inside. Does the ASCE 7 consider the lateral forces of water rising above sea level or flood of any kind staying for several days? I'm not sure I fully understand that question. If it's flood related, I am not the person to answer that. Does ICC 500 apply to safe rooms and residential structures? Yes, it does. Wait a minute here. It's jumping around a little bit. Okay. So yes, 500 does apply to residential. Does this apply to flat open land, not just seawater, not just water? No, it does not. Flat open land. Flat open land would be an exposure C condition. Exposure D condition is exposed to wind flowing over open water. Iris, you're going to send me another. I'm not following. U-form buildings not react the same for lateral. Oh, I see what you're saying about that U shape. It's not about the design of the building. It's about the fact that, you know, when I showed that U-shaped building for tornado design and affected plan area, it was about it's more about risk and what tornado level you're at risk of. The size of the build, larger the building gets, the more sensitive to impacts from tornado it is. So it really had nothing to do with nothing to do with the design of the building. In recent years, eater spouts have entered to the island of Puerto Rico. We're in the ASCE 7. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure how to address that. Are there any state issued maps in our future to summarize the zones? I'm assuming you're talking about the windborne debris region. We hope that comes out of the new study. That's the expectation, that we're going to have some type of map that's going to do a little bit better job of identifying where these areas are. Because this the language that we have now, it's very complicated and almost unenforceable. Is the angle of measurement defined perpendicular or an angle of the root angle of to 45, 60 degrees? I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about there. If you're talking about measurement from the mean high water line, it doesn't say. So we've interpreted it to mean, I say we, I mean everybody has, you know, to mean perpendicular to the water line, like I showed you on the drawings today, or the example sketches and whatnot. What differentiates the 5,000 feet of water versus 5,000 feet over greens at a golf course? Again, a golf course is an exposure D condition. That's open terrain with scattered obstructions. Exposure D, it's very specifically the open water exposure, not golf courses. But if you had a large lake on a golf course, then that might play a factor. Let's see. Any consideration given to given to applying the 5,000 feet of open water to an open land area? Again, no. This doesn't have anything to do with open terrain. An airport, I mean, these kind of things, this open terrain, they are going to affect the design of the building in terms of the exposure category you use. Okay, just like, you know, if you're in the middle of a subdivision, you know, you're likely going to be exposure B. You know, but and if you move that same building to next to an airport runway, then it's going to be exposure C. Design pressures are going to go up perhaps 40% if it's a short building, up to 20% for taller buildings. And then if you put it next to the large inland lake where it's exposure D, then it's going to go up another 20%. But this windborne debris region is only affected by bodies of water. Do you have an AI course for this? I think Becky is answering that one. Okay, well, it looks like there are a few more coming in. Okay, looks like it's it. Let me check the chat real quick. I don't see anything here. Looks like we're good here.
Great job, Eric.
Thank you. I'm almost right on time. Almost again. Thanks everyone for coming. And like I said, on behalf of Anderson Windows, really appreciate you attending this webinar today. Thanks, Crystal and Wendy and Hillary